Marcos is one of those brands which, for me, I would put in a similar category to TVR, Spiker, various others that I love, and much like those other brands, they seem to have this curse of trying to come back and then they go away. And although this video probably won't benefit the company in question, I just wanted to put my thoughts out there, to think out loud about a company that I love. I did an open letter quite some time ago to Spiker, and this is kind of that version but for Marcos. See, I think I do have an idea for how Marcos could come back, and how, unlike the other times that they've tried to, they can actually stick around. Because the problem that Marcos has, or at least what they've been having, is they keep trying to do the same thing and expecting a different result, and that is making a sports car. Now, yes, they are known for that, but you have to change and adapt to the times. And one of the reasons why many brands that have come back have done so well is because they've stayed true to their roots, but at the same time they've updated their methods and their overall idea. Take Alpine. Alpine is a perfect example of something which could have easily failed, but they've ended up doing well, even against the establishment of brands like Porsche. They are the exception though, not the rule. And to me, Marcos needs to look to their history to come back and actually make a car that could stick around and do well enough to then make their traditional stuff if they wanted to. And the vehicle which I believe has the key to that success is right here on screen. From 7 years ago, here on the channel in a Gran Turismo game, the Mini Marcos. My love for Marcos really spawned from the Marcos Mini back in the Gran Turismo 4 days, and to me it's actually kind of the best all-round car they've ever made, because it was based on an existing brilliant design with plenty of parts and support infrastructure that they could then put their own flair on. It was almost like a coach building style vehicle, which used to be much more of a thing in the automotive world and then became much more niche over time. Now though, I believe if they were to come back, there is a perfect formula to do it. See, right now, Mini has electric models, and they are not quite as quick as the Cooper, but they're not far off, up around 200 pound-feet of torque. The weight deficit is only 145 kilos more, which sounds massive, but considering how much heavier batteries are, etc., you've got about 150 miles of range or so, and even the pricing is not as crazy as many other electric cars, being about 32 to 35,000 pounds. Now, what I think would be awesome, and what I believe could give Marcos the key to coming back and sticking around, is to enter the niche that no one else is doing. See, to be successful, you need to either do what everyone else is doing better than them, or do what no one else is doing. This is something which I've said before, and it's one of the reasons why I love the all-electric Maserati Gran Turismo. I already love the brand, but they did something deliberate there. It's the only two-door GT in the electric category, and although it won't be for long, they were the first to do it, and that's a big deal, because it means they don't need to compete with stuff like the Porsche Taycan or a Tesla. It's its own thing. Likewise, Marcos needs to do what they did back with the Mini Marcos, carve out their own niche, and in a beautifully appropriate way, they could, just like back then, base it on a Mini again. You've already got the infrastructure of the electric Mini, rebody it with that fastback style that the Mini Marcos had, even with a little glass hatch rear window to access the boot, keep it as a strict two-seater fastback like the original was. You could account for the extra weight of the electric by then reducing the weight over the Mini by doing stuff like having two seats. You could even use other bodywork to make it lighter as well, and in terms of performance, it doesn't need to be the quickest thing in the world. The 0 to 60 time is around the 7-second range on the electric Mini, which is more than quick enough for a city runabout, and the 0 to 30 mile an hour, which again is great for cornering, is 3.9 seconds. Even if they carried over that exact same performance into the Marcos, that would be more than quick enough. Crucially, I believe if they could try and keep the price not that much higher than the Mini, of course you have to make it a little bit more to account for the smaller brand, but if it was anywhere around the £40,000 mark, the fact that the market is there for crazy small runabouts is actually kind of shown by the Aston Martin Signet. That was an invitation-only vehicle, and yet look at their used values. A used Signet will still cost you around £20,000 because it's just so niche. It doesn't have to be the best thing out there, and if you just wanted the better option, we'll get the Toyota IQ for a fraction of the cost. It's for people who want that specific thing. Likewise with Marcos, they need to be practical enough and useful enough to be a genuine alternative, but also use that infrastructure that the Mini gives you to make your production costs far lower, to make parts and servicing much simpler, and also to keep the car as a viable option, not only for people who might have bought a Mini, but for people who wouldn't have bought a Mini. See, the Marcos Mini is such a different car at the same time as being so similar that they are viably different. That, I believe, could be the key to Marcos coming back and sticking around. I could kind of envision what it would look like in my head. The original was already an oddball looking little car. I think you could easily revise the looks up for today. And the only thing which you really need to carry over is the Mini shaped headlights and the fastback rear end with the glass hatch. It would instantly be recognisable for Marcos fans, and even though people who don't like electric will bemoan it, the simple thing is, from a business perspective, you cannot rely on the old school fans, because as it's shown before with Marcos popping up and going away, clearly the old school fans don't buy enough cars to keep them around. So you need to expand the audience, appeal to new people, get the new faces in, get the funds growing, and then you could make a Marcos sports car on the side, electric or not. I don't think that this will happen, but I believe that if Marcos tried to do something like this, existing infrastructure, massively cutting down on development costs, making it much simpler and more sustainable, even in low-level production, to build a car like this, well, all I think you would really need is for the word of mouth to start spreading, and unlike the Mini, the Marcos has the advantage of not being as comparable to all of those various rivals from other brands, like Volkswagen, the Funky Cat, and beyond. The Mini Marcos always was a niche, but it was a very good little niche, to the point of even racing at Le Mans, and it was the only British car to finish, in the same kind of era as Ken Miles in his Ford GT40. I believe that if Marcos looked to the past by bringing back the Mini, but combining it with a modern EV tech, making it well priced, super practical, even with limited range, it doesn't matter too much because that's the kind of car that it is, with good enough performance to be a basis. They could always make more powerful versions with bigger batteries later on. And ultimately, yeah, that's it for my idea of how I at least think Marcos could come back and potentially actually stick around this time. I don't think it actually will happen, and I don't think anyone with any kind of power or connection to Marcos would ever watch this video, but even if they did, and even if they took the idea, I wouldn't be upset at all. I would love to see Marcos come back, and just as the icing on the cake, for legal reasons they probably wouldn't call it the Marcos Mini anymore, but I do have another idea for that too. I believe you could bring it back and call it the Marcos Sprint, and I'd certainly hope in one way or another that they do come back, because I love them. But that's it for now, and as always, thanks for watching.